We're still getting these revelations. The Twitter files is probably one of the larger ones that actually happened. And it had huge consequences, had a great impact on how we understand the world. Schulte, nobody really knows about his case. He is in a Supermax prison designed to drive you insane. This prison is where they hold El Chapo, and it's to send a message to others. These people who control the levers of power essentially don't want us to find out what's going on inside. This is the toll that these people pay for bringing us information. Julian Assange can get out of prison. That was a huge effort and a huge win for us to show that we can win. By the end, we were at 78% of Australians wanted the government to do something to bring Julian home. So they couldn't ignore it anymore.
We mentioned Ed Snowden before. What are his chances of receiving some kind of pardon?
Archie.
Do you think the effectiveness of whistleblowers is still prevalent today, or what do you think the effect of a whistleblower is today?
Probably, if you look at the Twitter files, right, that was essentially another big whistleblower leak. I mean, Elon Musk doesn't really claim to be a whistleblower, but I think that was
that was huge.
Yeah, that was very revealing, and it had a huge impact on the US election, right? Like and you could see the narrative control that was used during that election with the Hunter Biden laptop story, that being squashed, and how social media, big government, the intelligence services all worked hand in glove to change that narrative around that story and affect the US election. So I think we're still seeing some of these, they don't come in this neat way that we traditionally understand whistleblowers, but we're still getting these revelations. And I think the Twitter files is probably one of the more recent ones, one of the larger ones that actually happened. And it had huge consequences in the United States, led to the USAID essentially being
disbanded.
Disbanded. And so it had these huge repercussions and these huge consequences on the sort of global effort of narrative control from within the US, from within the CIA, the USAID being essentially an arm of the CIA that it used to control information around the world. It was sort of, I don't know, I found it quite amusing that you had all these journalists up in arms saying, "Oh, we've lost our funding, we've lost our funding now. We can't do our reporting because we're not getting money from the US government anymore." And
what kind of a journalist are you?
Yeah. And so it really identified actually who are the government shills, right? And they're all putting their hand up saying, "We're not getting our government money anymore. We can't do journalism." And you're like, well, maybe it wasn't journalism this whole time. And so, the impact of those leaks from within Twitter and the exposing of that conspiracy, I think had a great impact on how we understand the world.
We spoke about the bravery of whistleblowers and the cost to them as a result of making those courageous disclosures to the public. You are an activist, and you mentioned a couple of people, I think 2 or 3 people who are bearing the cost of that with imprisonment. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's right. So I mentioned earlier the 2017 Vault 7 leaks, the CIA hacking tools leaks. So that was when everything really turned nasty for Julian, and he ended up serving 5 years in a maximum security prison. He was found to have endured psychological torture by UN representatives on torture who assess torture around the world. But that was for the publishing of that information. Now, there's a young man who was allegedly the leaker of that information, who has been sentenced to 45 years in prison in the United States, and that's Joshua Schulte. He is in Florence, Colorado, Supermax prison under special administrative measures, which is a prison regime that is designed to drive you insane. You're held incommunicado, no light in your cell, you don't get to leave your cell.
That seems to be a particularly vindictive measure because of what he's done, rather than any need to control or punish his behavior in prison. Is that quite a common thing to happen to whistleblowers, that they get especially harsh treatment that's above and beyond just mere incarceration as a vindictive measure for going against the state?
Yeah, certainly. And it's especially to send a message, to say to other whistleblowers, if you think about doing this, you're not just going to be in general population serving prison. You're going to be this prison is where they hold El Chapo. This is the sort of people who are serving alongside this young man in this prison regime, and it's to send a message to others. It's to send a message to other people within the government, within the intelligence community, that if you do this, it won't just be prison time you're serving. We'll go after your mind. We will drive you insane, and that actually leads to our ability to understand what's going on inside our human institutions is actually lessened by this. So it all gets back to us as individuals and us knowing about what's going on inside our institutions, that these people who control the levers of power essentially don't want us to find out what's going on inside, so they have to go after these whistleblowers and make examples of them.
And there was another person,
David McBride. So he's an Australian Special Forces or SAS lawyer. He was who blew the whistle on civilian deaths and other crimes that were happening in the Afghan war, and he's serving 5 years in prison in an Australian prison in Canberra.
He prosecuted on behest of the American government, or the Australian government took it upon itself to do that?
But the Australian government prosecuted him himself, and it was around the same period, around 2017, when his revelations came out. The Australian Federal Police actually raided the ABC in Australia, which is
public broadcaster,
government news organisation. So they raided those organisations and asked, and essentially took all the files that McBride had leaked. They went into these news organisations, took them all, took all those files, and actually prosecuted McBride, and he's now serving a prison sentence. And he's an older man. He's in his 50s. He's got 2 teenage daughters. He's a family man, and his family is torn apart and destroyed, and they've been fighting this fight. It's not just the 5-year prison sentence that he's doing, but the legal battle and everything leading up to that, that he's had to stop making an income, all these things to focus on that battle as well. So this is the toll that these people pay for bringing us information, for bringing us criminal behaviour, essentially exposing corruption. These people are gone after, and they're the ones who are being punished, not the people they exposed.
What are the prospects of either receiving some kind of pardon, or I guess an exoneration is probably a stretch, but some kind of pardon either way? I'm not sure if we do pardons in Australia, but there is a presidential pardon in America.
Yeah, there is a potential. There's an avenue for David to have a pardon, and for Schulte, I think even just a time served type scenario could be available to him from President Trump. But either of those sort of situations, as long as these guys get out of jail and are able to get on with their life, I think to us that sends an example, or sends a message to other whistleblowers that we can win, right? Like Julian Assange can get out of prison. That was a huge effort and a huge win for us to show that you can publish this information. Sure, you'll get locked up, but we can get you out. We can win, and I think that sends a huge message to everyone around the world. And that's what we want to do for these whistleblowers. We want to get them out of prison for them, but also to show others that it's not the end of your life. People like Edward Snowden, you might be, you might have to live in Russia, but he can have a family. He's with his wife and things like that. So it's not the end of your life. If
Russia is not a gulag. It's actually, Moscow is a nice city. Right? You can have a good life there.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, most of our audience, at least half, are American. What avenues are there for them to be able to support the campaign for,
for Schulte.
For Schulte's
they can
pardon?
go, so they just have to go to our website, informationrights.org, and they can sign up for our newsletter there, and we will update them with information about the campaign for Schulte as we progress it along. Schulte, he's nobody really knows about his case. It hasn't really been publicised, and that's a very deliberate thing by the government in the United States to keep a lid on it, a lid on that persecution. Go to informationrights.org, join up to our mailing list, and we can keep you updated with actions and things that can be done to help Schulte get out of prison.
We mentioned Ed Snowden before. What are his chances of receiving some kind of pardon? Because I remember when Trump was coming back into his second term, he alluded to both Assange and Snowden without making a distinction, that he had more sympathy for one over the other for their indiscretions. And at the moment, your brother has been released, but Ed Snowden has not received his pardon. So should we take that as indicative of Trump being not receptive to pardoning Snowden? Or
I'm not sure,
still
actually.
Possible?
Yeah, well, so I think there's a Candace Owens interview, right, with Trump, where she asks him, about Julian and Snowden, and he said, I was leaning more towards one than the other. And a lot of people, I know Glenn Greenwald said, he was leaning towards Snowden. So I'm sure towards the end of Trump's term, there will be a renewed campaign for a pardon for Edward Snowden. And I know a lot of people around Trump want a pardon for Snowden. Tucker Carlson's been very vocal on a pardon for Edward Snowden, as well as a pardon for Julian. I think his chances are as good as any of getting one. I mean, if CZ can get a pardon, you just I don't know if
at what cost?
Yeah, I'm not going to make any sort of allegations like that, but
I'm not hating on CZ. If you can do it, right? But I want to be respectful of your time. One last question I wanted to ask you: that, like, your brother's, if I can call it merely an ordeal, really intensified my disdain for the Australian government. I think it diminished the value of an Australian passport and citizenship. What was it that finally tipped them over to bear more pressure on the US government?
It was a grassroots campaign. It was a bottom-up campaign that led to the Australian government actually, going from, like you said, actually doing nothing, less than nothing, actually worse than nothing. Julia Gillard, who was the Prime Minister at the time, was actually looking at how they could prosecute Julian when he released these files.
A Labor Prime Minister.
Yeah, Labor Prime Minister. And it was a grassroots campaign that we did in Australia, and we built up this huge subscriber base and really lobbied the government hard, and it took years to turn that around.
Did you feel there was public support from the outset, or was there an inflection point where that grew, or it was irrelevant?
No, it grew and grew. So we had polling. We had polling over 5 years. It started off at 30% and then went to 50%. And by the end, we were at 78% of Australians wanted the government to do something to bring Julian home. So they couldn't ignore it anymore. They had to do something. And then it's taking those grassroots actions and how we level them up into political power is sort of what we learned in the fight to free Julian, and what we want to do for other whistleblowers as well.